Imagine a quiet evening in Seattle in the mid-1950s. The city wasn't yet the bustling hub of technology that it would one day become. The skies were painted with shades of gray, and the air smelled faintly of rain on pine trees. It was here, on October 28, 1955, that a boy entered the world, a boy who would one day redefine what it meant to dream in the digital age. His name, William Henry Gates III. To most of us, he would become simply Bill Gates. The story begins not with computers or billion-dollar companies, but with family. Bill was born into a household that was warm, ambitious, and competitive. His father, William H. Gates Sr., was a towering figure, both physically and in presence, a respected attorney who believed in discipline, structure, and the pursuit of excellence. His mother, Mary Maxwell Gates, brought balance, strong-willed yet nurturing, deeply involved in community service, and filled with the kind of charm that could win over any room she entered. From his earliest years, Bill lived in a home where ideas mattered, where questions weren't discouraged, and where challenges were thrown at the dinner table like sparks waiting to ignite young minds. Picture a small boy with oversized glasses, sitting at the kitchen table, staring intently at a puzzle. His sisters, Christy and Libby, teased him for being so serious all the time. But Bill wasn't easily distracted. He was methodical, stubborn even. "Come on, Billy," his mother would say gently, "you'll wear yourself out." But he wouldn't. Once he began something, he had to finish it. That persistence, some might call it obsession, was etched into him from the start. So he was curious, restless, and always pushing boundaries. At school, teachers quickly noticed he was different, not just intelligent, but unnervingly sharp. He could read faster than most kids his age, process information like a machine, and yet he was easily bored. When the lessons moved too slowly, he'd retreat into his own world, a world filled with numbers, books, and endless questions. One teacher once said, Bill was the kid who would ask the one question that made you rethink the whole lesson plan. But brilliance doesn't come without its struggles. Bill was awkward socially. He wasn't the most athletic, not the most charming kid in the playground. Instead of joining games, he preferred staying in the library, flipping through encyclopedias, diving into topics far beyond his years. That isolation sometimes hurt him. He wanted friends, but he also wanted to feed his mind, and often the two didn't align. It was his mother who recognized something important. Her son needed direction, a challenge big enough to match the fire in his mind. She encouraged him, pushed him into activities that built resilience. Scouts, sports, debates, anything that would shape not only his brain, but his ability to deal with people. Mary was the steady voice that kept Bill from vanishing completely into his own head. And yet as he grew older, that inner spark only grew brighter. He became fascinated with logic, strategy, and systems. He played endless games of Monopoly and Risk, not for fun, but to win, to understand patterns, to outthink everyone else. His family recalls how he'd sit there, eyes narrowed, calculating 10 moves ahead. Losing was not an option, not for Bill. By the time he was in middle school, his parents saw the signs clearly. Bill wasn't just smart, he was exceptional. So they made a decision that would alter the course of his destiny. They enrolled him in the Lakeside School, an elite private institution known for rigorous academics and forward-thinking education. Now, it was at Lakeside where fate finally revealed its hand. The school had just received something unusual for that era, a computer terminal. This was the late 1960s, a time when computers weren't the sleek, powerful devices we know today, but massive machines that filled rooms, operated with punch cards, and seemed more like science fiction than reality. Most students glanced at the terminal and shrugged. To them, it was confusing, foreign, intimidating, but not to Bill Gates. The first time he saw that terminal, something shifted inside him. He approached it slowly, his heart racing. He touched the keyboard, typed a few commands, and watched as the machine responded. It was as if he discovered a new language, a secret code that spoke directly to his restless mind. For the first time in his life, Bill felt he had found something big enough to challenge him endlessly. Day after day, he spent hours at the terminal. He skipped classes, ignored homework, even stayed late after school, just to be near the machine. Teachers began to notice that his attendance in other subjects was slipping, but whenever he was in front of the computer, he was electric. It wasn't just interest, it was love. And he wasn't alone. A small group of boys shared his obsession, among them a lanky, socially awkward kid named Paul Allen. Together they explored the mysteries of programming, writing code late into the night, pushing the machine to its limits. They were just teenagers, but in their minds, they were explorers, pioneers, stepping into uncharted territory. One story goes that the Lakeside Computer had limited free time available for students, but Bill and Paul found ways around it. They dived deep into the system, sometimes even manipulating code to gain more time. Eventually, they were caught. Instead of punishment, something remarkable happened. The Computer Center Corporation that managed the machine recognized their talent. They struck a deal the boys could keep programming if they helped identify bugs in the system. Imagine that. Teenagers hired to debug professional software. Bill loved every second of it. Yet this new world wasn't free of challenges. He was young, inexperienced, and often frustrated when things didn't work. Late at night, he'd sit with Paul, arguing over code, tempers flaring, only to break into laughter when they finally solved a problem. These were the early lessons: persistence, problem-solving, collaboration, and the thrill of chasing something bigger than yourself. Outside of computers, though, Bill's life wasn't smooth. He clashed with authority figures. His stubbornness sometimes made him difficult. His parents worried. Was he too obsessed? Too narrow-focused? They wanted balance for their son, but Bill wanted intensity. He wanted to push limits, to chase excellence without compromise. Those arguments at home shaped him, taught him to defend his ideas fiercely, to stand his ground traits that would later define his leadership. By his teenage years, the computer world became his refuge, his battlefield, and his playground. Alongside Paul Allen, he founded a small venture, dabbling in projects that hinted at his entrepreneurial spark. One of them was TrafoData, a system that processed raw traffic data to generate reports for city planners. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't a billion-dollar success, but it was something more important, a taste of possibility. Bill was beginning to see that computers weren't just machines, they were tools that could reshape the world. But as the 1970s arrived, the real test came knocking. Graduation loomed, and like many brilliant kids, Bill faced the inevitable question: what next? His parents, practical and wise, envisioned him following in his father's footsteps, perhaps law school, a stable career, something prestigious. Bill respected that vision, but deep inside, he knew it wasn't his path. He wanted more. He wanted something that no one else could yet see. There's a moment often told in his story, Bill's mother asking him at the dinner table, "What will you do with your life, Bill?" And he, without hesitation, replied, "I want to work with computers." The room fell silent. Computers? At a time when barely anyone understood what they were? To his family, it seemed uncertain, even foolish. But to Bill, it was destiny. He would soon head to Harvard University, a place brimming with brilliance, opportunity, and tradition. Yet as he packed his bags, he carried more than just clothes and books. He carried a vision, a fire, and a belief that somewhere inside those blinking machines was the future, his future. And so the boy from Seattle, restless and relentless, stepped onto the grand stage of life. He was not yet the billionaire, not yet the icon, not yet the philanthropist who would touch millions. He was simply a dreamer armed with code, ambition, and a refusal to let the world remain the same. The autumn of 1973 at Harvard University had the crisp air of change. Students walked briskly through the yard, carrying books, brimming with ambition, their eyes set on futures that seemed secure and golden. Among them walked a tall, lean young man with a mop of brown hair, thick glasses perched on his nose, and an intensity in his gaze that set him apart. His name was William Henry Gates III, though most just called him Bill. To the outside world, Bill Gates seemed like a typical Harvard freshman. He attended classes, met new people, and carried the burden of expectation that came with being admitted to one of the most prestigious institutions in the world. But inside, Bill's heart wasn't racing for law or politics, or even the conventional academic brilliance Harvard demanded. It beat for something else, something untested, something misunderstood: computers. Late at night, while others discussed philosophy or history, Bill was in the computer lab, surrounded by the hum of machines, losing track of time. He would type furiously, eyes locked on the screen, chasing problems with the relentlessness of a man who saw the future hidden in lines of code. His parents had hoped Harvard would smooth his edges, make him disciplined, perhaps guide him into law like his father. But Harvard did something else entirely. It exposed him to an environment of vast possibilities. Yet it also confronted him with a challenge. How could he follow a path no one else believed in? During his sophomore year, a familiar figure re-entered his life: Paul Allen. Paul, older and just as obsessed with computers, visited Bill often. The two would sit for hours, brainstorming, arguing, laughing, and dreaming. They had already tasted failure with their Trafo data project back in Seattle. The idea had been clever, using a small computer to process traffic flow data for city planners. But when they tried to sell it, the world wasn't ready. Clients were skeptical, the product buggy. Trafo data was dismissed as a failure. But here's the thing about failure. For some, it's the end. For Bill Gates, it was fuel. Trafo data hadn't broken him, it had sharpened him. He learned that timing mattered, execution mattered, and most of all, persistence mattered. Then came the turning point. One evening in December 1974, Paul Allen rushed into Bill's dorm room at Harvard, holding the latest issue of Popular Electronics. On the cover was a picture of the Altair 8800, a small, boxy machine that looked unimpressive to most. But to Bill and Paul, it was revolutionary. It was the first real personal computer kit available for hobbyists. For the first time, computing wasn't locked in giant corporations or universities. It could be personal, it could be in homes. Bill's eyes widened as he stared at the magazine. "This is it," he whispered. Paul grinned, nodding. They both knew this wasn't just another project. This was destiny knocking. The two immediately began working on creating software for the Altair. But there was a catch. They didn't actually have an Altair. So they simulated one on Harvard's computer systems, spending countless nights coding, debugging, and pushing their minds to the edge. Bill skipped classes, ignored assignments, and once again dove completely into the world of programming. Finally, after weeks of relentless effort, they had something, a version of BASIC, a programming language adapted for the Altair. Paul flew to Albuquerque to demonstrate it to MIT's, the company behind the Altair. Bill, nervous but confident, waited for news. And then the call came. It worked. The demo was a success. MIT's wanted their software. That single moment, two young men writing software for a machine they didn't even own, was the spark that ignited Microsoft. Bill now faced the decision of his life. Harvard represented safety, prestige, and the path his parents wished for him. But this was the future. With trembling certainty, he called his parents and told them he was dropping out. His mother's voice wavered with worry. His father questioned the risk. But Bill didn't flinch. "I have to do this," he told them. "If I don't, someone else will, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." In 1975, Bill Gates and Paul Allen officially founded Microsoft, a blend of microcomputer and software. At first, it was just two young men working day and night, driven by passion, fueled by caffeine, and armed with nothing but vision. Their office in Albuquerque was small, cluttered, and humble, but to them it was a palace. Life wasn't glamorous. Bill worked tirelessly, sometimes sleeping under his desk. He obsessed over every detail, writing and rewriting code, pushing his team and himself to the brink. Paul would later recall that Bill's intensity was both inspiring and intimidating. He demanded perfection, not because he was cruel, but because he knew the stakes. The world wasn't yet convinced that personal computers had a future. Bill was determined to prove them wrong. There were struggles, of course. Clients doubted them, money was tight, and competition was fierce. Bill faced endless rejections, endless moments where failure loomed, but every time he returned stronger, hungrier. One night after a long day of coding, Bill looked at Paul and said, "We're not just writing programs, we're building the future." And slowly the world began to notice. Microsoft's software spread. The name, once strange, began to mean something. And behind it all was a young dropout from Harvard, restless, relentless, unstoppable. The boy from Seattle had taken his first giant leap. The journey from zero to hero was underway. The autumn leaves crunched beneath hurried footsteps as young Bill Gates walked through Harvard Yard. The year was 1973, and the campus pulsed with ambition. Students debated politics in dorms, dreamt of law, medicine, business, and academia. To most of them, Harvard was the pinnacle, the gateway to secure futures and prestigious careers. But for Bill, Harvard was temporary, a stop, not a destination. He didn't quite know how, but he felt destiny calling him elsewhere. Bill had been admitted to Harvard with the intent of studying pre-law, partly to satisfy his father's wishes. William H. Gates Sr. had carved a name for himself as a formidable attorney in Seattle, and it seemed natural for his son to follow that path. Yet when professors called on Bill in class, he answered, but his eyes often betrayed distraction. His thoughts weren't on case law or constitutional debates. His mind was back in the computer labs, on the blinking cursor that seemed to whisper to him like an unsolved riddle. He spent hours in the Applied Sciences Center, typing away on the PDP-10 machines, programming long after most students had gone to bed. His dorm room in Courier House was cluttered not with law books, but with computer printouts, technical journals, and empty soda cans from nights spent coding until dawn. One roommate later recalled, "You could walk into our dorm at 2 a.m, and Bill would still be at the terminal. He barely slept. Sometimes he'd go without eating, just lost in the code. It was like nothing else mattered." Yet despite his obsession, Bill did make connections at Harvard. One of the most important was with a brilliant, quick-witted fellow student named Steve Ballmer. They would play poker late into the night, argue philosophy, and joke about the absurdities of campus life. Steve was energetic, outgoing, and had a booming laugh that could fill a room. He didn't know it then, but one day he would become one of the key figures in Microsoft's empire. But in these early days, Bill's closest partner wasn't Ballmer, it was Paul Allen. Paul and Bill had been inseparable since their teenage years in Seattle. Paul, a few years older, was quieter, more thoughtful, but just as passionate about computers. He'd enrolled at Washington State University, but his heart wasn't there. His friendship with Bill was rekindled when he frequently visited Cambridge, and whenever the two sat down together, conversations stretched into the early hours. One bitterly cold December evening in 1974, Paul burst into Bill's dorm carrying a magazine. His eyes shone with urgency. "Bill, you've got to see this." He slapped down the latest issue of Popular Electronics. On the cover was the Altair 8800, a small, boxy kit computer that hobbyists could buy and assemble at home. Bill picked it up, his pulse quickening. This changes everything," he murmured. Paul leaned forward. "It's the first real personal computer. Not just for labs, not just for corporations, for individuals, for homes." Bill's eyes locked onto Paul's. "Then we need to be part of this." "No, we need to lead this." They were still just students. They had no company, no money, not even an Altair machine to test on. But Bill Gates had never cared about limits. Where others saw obstacles, he saw opportunities. That night, in the dim glow of his dorm room lamp, he and Paul began sketching out a plan. Till they would write a version of BASIC, a simple programming language that could run on the Altair. The problem? They didn't have the hardware. So Bill and Paul did something audacious. They simulated the Altair on Harvard's computer systems, building software for a machine they had never touched. It was like building a key for a lock they had never seen, trusting it would fit perfectly when the moment came. For weeks, Bill barely slept. His friends noticed him missing meals, skipping classes, disappearing into the computer lab with Paul. One night, after hours of debugging, Bill slammed his fist on the desk. "It has to work. It just has to. If we pull this off, we're not just writing code, Paul. We're writing the future." Finally, they had something that resembled a working version. Paul flew to Albuquerque, where MITS, the company behind the Altair, was headquartered. Bill, too anxious to stay still, paced the dorm halls waiting for news. Hours later, the phone rang. It was Paul, his voice bursting with excitement. "Bill, it worked. It ran on the first try." For a moment, Bill didn't speak. He closed his eyes, a smile slowly spreading across his face. Then he let out a sharp laugh. "We did it." That phone call marked the birth of Microsoft. At first, they called it Microsoft, a combination of microcomputer and software. It wasn't yet a corporation. It wasn't yet a household name. It was just two young men with a vision, working out of a tiny office in Albuquerque. Their headquarters was small, cluttered, and filled with the smell of coffee, papers stacked on desks, and the constant hum of typewriters and early terminals. Bill threw himself into the work with a ferocity that startled those around him. He was only 20 years old, but he carried himself with the intensity of a man twice his age. He demanded perfection. When employees turned in sloppy code, he would stay late into the night rewriting it himself. Some found him intimidating, others found him inspiring. Everyone knew one thing: Bill Gates would not stop until the vision was realized. But visions don't pay the bills. Money was tight. There were nights when Bill and Paul wondered if they could keep the company afloat. They lived frugally, poured every dollar back into the business, and survived on little more than determination. Bill often joked, "We're rich in code, poor in everything else." There was another challenge: piracy. Early on, Bill discovered that many hobbyists were sharing their basic software freely, copying it without paying. For Bill, this was not only theft, but a threat to the survival of their fragile company. In 1976, he wrote the now famous Open Letter to Hobbyists, passionately arguing that software should be paid for, that programmers deserve to be compensated for their work. The letter was controversial. Some saw Bill as greedy, but he wasn't fighting for money alone. He was fighting for the principle that software was valuable, that it was the foundation of a new industry. Looking back, that letter was one of the earliest signs of his fierce business instincts. Still, doubts lingered. Bill's parents worried. His father, though supportive, couldn't fully understand why his son would abandon Harvard, a golden ticket for an uncertain venture in the desert. His mother, Mary, urged him to think carefully. "Bill," she said during one tense conversation, "are you sure about this? You're throwing away Harvard, a degree, stability." Bill looked at her with that familiar stubbornness. "Mom, this is bigger than Harvard. This is bigger than me. If I don't do this now, someone else will, and they'll change the world instead of me." Silence hung in the air. His parents didn't fully understand, but they recognized the fire in their son's eyes. And so, with cautious support, they let him walk his chosen path. By 1976, Microsoft had moved beyond just the Altair. They were writing software for other early personal computers, expanding their reach. Bill was relentless, knocking on doors, making deals, persuading hardware companies that their machines needed Microsoft software. He was no longer just the boy from Seattle or the dropout from Harvard. He was becoming something else, a leader, an entrepreneur, a visionary. And though the world hadn't yet realized it, the seeds of a revolution had already been planted. One evening, as the sun set over Albuquerque, Bill sat with Paul outside their modest office. They were tired, drained from yet another long day of work. Paul asked softly, "Do you ever wonder if we're crazy, Bill, betting everything on this?" Bill stared into the horizon, his eyes sharp. "Crazy? Maybe. But the world doesn't change by playing it safe. And I'd rather be crazy now than regretful later." Paul smiled faintly. "Then let's keep being crazy." And with that, the two friends returned inside, where the glow of screens awaited them. The company was still fragile, still uncertain, but its foundation had been laid. The boy who once stared at puzzles in his kitchen, who found refuge in computers at Lakeside, who chose risk over safety at Harvard, had now taken his first giant steps into history. Microsoft was alive, and though the journey ahead would be filled with battles, failures, victories, and unimaginable success, one thing was clear: Bill Gates had chosen his path, and he would walk it with unstoppable determination. The world was about to change forever. The late 1970s were a whirlwind for Bill Gates and Paul Allen. What had begun as a risky experiment in a cramped office in Albuquerque was now starting to catch fire. The personal computer revolution had arrived, and Microsoft was at its heart. But the road ahead was not paved with gold. It was rocky, uncertain, and filled with competitors who were bigger, richer, and more established. In 1979, Microsoft relocated its headquarters from Albuquerque back to Bill's hometown of Seattle. For Bill, it was a return to familiar skies and rain-soaked streets. But more importantly, it was a strategic move. Seattle provided better access to talent, to clients, and to the resources Microsoft desperately needed to grow. The company, once just Bill and Paul, now had a growing team of programmers. Each one felt the intensity of working under Gates. Bill's leadership was unlike anything most had experienced. He was young, barely in his 20s, but he commanded the room. He was blunt, direct, and unrelenting. If you wrote sloppy code, he would tear it apart, line by line, sometimes in front of the entire team. Some employees called it Bill's review. It was brutal, but it forced people to do better. One programmer recalled nervously handing Bill a piece of code late one evening. Bill read it quickly, shook his head, and said, "This is garbage. Rewrite it. You can do better." The programmer was crushed but went home and worked all night, returning with a version that was cleaner, faster, sharper. Bill reviewed it again and this time simply nodded. Now that's good. It wasn't cruelty. It was demand for excellence. Bill knew Microsoft couldn't compete with giants by being average. They had to be exceptional. The real breakthrough came in 1980. IBM, one of the most powerful companies in the world, was preparing to enter the personal computer market. They needed an operating system for their new machine. Microsoft was still small compared to giants like Digital Research, but Gates saw the opportunity of a lifetime. When IBM first approached Microsoft, they weren't even looking for an operating system. They wanted programming languages. But Bill, sharp as ever, steered the conversation. "We can provide you with what you need," he told them confidently. The truth? Microsoft didn't even have an operating system at the time. But Bill wasn't about to let the chance slip away. After IBM left the room, Paul Allen looked at him wide-eyed. "Bill, we don't have an OS," Bill smirked. "Not yet, but we will." Within weeks, Microsoft struck a deal to purchase a simple operating system called QDOS, Quick and Dirty Operating System, from a small company in Seattle. They bought it for $50,000. Microsoft engineers refined it, polished it, and rebranded it as MS-DOS. That single deal would change the history of computing. In 1981, IBM released its personal computer with MS-DOS at its core. The machine was a success, and suddenly Microsoft wasn't just a small software shop. They were at the center of a technological explosion. Bill's genius wasn't just in writing code. It was in making deals. He structured the IBM contract so that Microsoft would retain the rights to sell MS-DOS to other companies. That decision made Microsoft the backbone of the entire PC industry. Every time a computer manufacturer wanted MS-DOS, they had to come to Gates, and they did. By the mid-1980s, Mississippi, DOS was running on millions of machines worldwide. Bill Gates was no longer just a brilliant programmer. He was a business strategist of the highest order. But success brought battles. One of the fiercest came from Apple. Steve Jobs, the charismatic co-founder of Apple, had built the Macintosh with a revolutionary graphical interface, icons, windows, and a mouse-driven design. It was elegant, user-friendly, and light years ahead of the clunky, text-driven MS-DOS. Jobs believed Apple would dominate the future. But Bill Gates had other plans. Microsoft had been developing its own graphical operating system, Windows. When Apple discovered the similarities, Jobs was furious. In one heated meeting, he accused Gates of theft. "You're ripping us off," Jobs shouted. Gates, calm but sharp, replied, "Well, Steve, I think it's more like we both had a rich neighbor named Xerox. I broke in to steal the TV, and you already stole it." The rivalry between Apple and Microsoft became one of the most famous in tech history. Jobs had style, charisma, and vision. Gates had grit, business acumen, and relentless focus. In the end, Windows, not Macintosh, became the dominant operating system. By 1986, Microsoft went public. The IPO made Bill Gates a multimillionaire overnight. He was just 31 years old. Within a year, he became the youngest billionaire in the world. Yet wealth didn't soften him. Bill still drove an ordinary car, wore simple sweaters, and spent most of his days in the office. He wasn't interested in yachts or luxury. He was obsessed with the mission. "Our goal," he often said, "is a computer on every desk and in every home, running Microsoft software." And he meant it. Through the late 1980s and 1990s, Microsoft expanded aggressively. Word, Excel, PowerPoint. The Office suite became essential for businesses. Windows, with its iconic start button and user-friendly interface, became the global standard. Microsoft's dominance was absolute. But absolute power attracts absolute scrutiny. In the 1990s, the U.S. government accused Microsoft of monopoly practices. The company was charged with using its dominance to crush competitors, especially Netscape, in the browser wars. The courtroom battles were fierce. Prosecutors painted Microsoft as a ruthless giant. Bill Gates was called to testify, and his deposition revealed a combative, defensive side. Clips of him evading questions, giving terse replies, and showing impatience circulated widely. For the first time, his image as a brilliant innovator was overshadowed by that of a cold, calculating monopolist. Behind the scenes, the stress was immense. Friends recall Bill pacing his office, furious at what he saw as government interference. He felt misunderstood. "We're building the future," he told colleagues, "and they want to punish us for it." Yet even in the storm, he never lost focus. He pushed his teams harder, demanded more innovation, and refused to let Microsoft lose its grip. And it worked. By the late 1990s, Microsoft was the most valuable company in the world. Bill Gates had gone from a teenage computer geek in Seattle to the richest man on earth. Forbes listed his net worth in the tens of billions. The boy who once skipped meals to code now had wealth beyond imagination. And yet, money was never his true motivation. Late at night after the office emptied, Bill would sometimes sit in silence, staring at the Seattle skyline. He had conquered the tech world. He had won the battles. But what now? One evening, he confided in Melinda French, a brilliant Microsoft manager he had begun dating. "I've built Microsoft into the most powerful company in the world," he said softly. "But I can't shake the feeling there's more I should be doing." Melinda, thoughtful and kind, looked at him. "Maybe the next chapter isn't just about building technology. Maybe it's about what you do with it." Bill nodded slowly. He didn't know it then, but those words planted a seed that would change the direction of his life. For now, though, the fire of competition still burned. Microsoft continued to dominate into the new millennium, embedding itself into every office, every home, every corner of the digital age. Bill Gates had achieved his dream, a computer on every desk and in every home. But as history would soon reveal, his greatest impact was yet to come. Bill Gates' top 100 success life lessons. 1. Success doesn't start with money. It starts with a vision burning inside your heart. 2. The best time to take a leap of faith is when the world thinks you're too young to try. 3. Every dream worth chasing begins in a garage, a basement, or a tiny room, not in fancy offices. 4. Don't wait until you're perfect to start. Start now, improve as you go. 5. Knowledge is power, but applied knowledge is destiny. 6. Your failures are not tombstones, they are stepping stones. Enduring. 7. Every no you hear is just preparing you for the one yes that changes your life. 8. Your greatest ally in success is curiosity. Never lose it. 9. Work on problems that matter. That's where true impact is born. Or 10. Build something that outlives you. 11. Surround yourself with people smarter than you. It's not a threat, it's your growth. 12. Partnerships make or break your journey. Choose them wisely. And 13. Sleep less on dreams, work more on them. 14. Your education never ends the day you leave school, it only begins. Your SOM. 15. Money is a tool, not the destination. 16. Learn to predict where the world is going and then arrive there first. 17. Patience is underrated. Empires are not built overnight. 18. Value time more than dollars. Time lost is gone forever. 19. Every giant company was once a crazy idea no one believed in. 20. Fear is temporary. Regret lasts forever. 21. If you can't code, learn to solve problems. Problem solving is the real code of life. 22. Competition keeps you sharp, but innovation keeps you alive. 23. Celebrate success, but more importantly, learn from failure. 24. Don't just chase success, chase usefulness. 25. A product people can't live without is a product that changes history. 26. Always keep your long game in mind. Don't get trapped in short-term wins. 27. Humility is the crown jewel of leadership. 28. Be the hardest worker in the room even when no one is watching. 29. Ask yourself daily, am I building something meaningful? 30. Never underestimate the power of persistence. 31. Your critics are your secret mentors in disguise. 32. Invest in people, not just in projects. 33. Learn to delegate. Great leaders build more leaders, not followers. 34. Read voraciously. Books are time machines of wisdom. 35. Always be willing to question your own ideas. 36. The market doesn't care about your feelings. It cares about value. 37. Create a product that solves a real problem, not just a cool idea. 38. Never let comfort replace hunger. 39. Your mistakes don't define you, how you respond to them does. 40. Risk is the currency of greatness. 41. Build trust before you build empires. You're 42. A strong brand is not just about logos. It's about trust, reliability, and impact. And 43. Stay frugal in success. Stay hungry in abundance. 44. Technology should empower, not enslave. 45. Wealth without purpose is poverty in disguise. 46. Always think 5 steps ahead. 47. Solve today's problems, but keep tomorrow's vision. 48. Greatness is not inherited, it is created. 49. Learn to say no. It's as powerful as saying yes. 50. The future belongs to those who prepare for it today. 51. Never lose your sense of wonder. 52. Write your goals, then double them. Endure. 53. Stay consistent. Consistency beats talent when talent is lazy. 54. True innovation often looks crazy at first. 55. Don't be afraid to disrupt yourself before someone else does. 56. Use criticism as energy, not as poison. 57. A leader's greatest power is listening. 58. Measure success not by money, but by impact. 59. Remember, legacy is louder than profit. 60. Simplicity always wins over complexity. Year 61. Every great empire begins with a why. 62. Don't chase trends, create them. 63. Greatness requires sacrifice, be ready to pay the price. 64. When others quit, double down. 65. Focus is the rarest superpower in today's distracted world. 66. Create systems, not just products. 67. Success is not about being the best, it's about being the only. 68. Be obsessed with improvement. More at 69. Stay relevant by staying a student. 70. Learn to manage failure and success will manage itself. 71. Don't just hire skills, hire values. 72. Empires collapse when egos rise. 73. Vision without execution is just hallucination. 74. Own your mistakes before they own you. 75. Build for scalability. Think big even when small. 76. Gratitude is a fuel that keeps you grounded. 77. Keep your personal life balanced. Burnout kills brilliance. 78. Treat setbacks as temporary guests, not permanent residents. 79. Choose impact over applause. 80. Reputation is built in decades and destroyed in minutes. Guard it. 81. Every rejection is redirection. 82. Don't underestimate small beginnings. 83. Partnerships require trust, not just contracts. 84. Fear mediocrity more than failure. 85. Innovate relentlessly or fade quietly. 86. Money follows value, not the other way around. 87. Stay paranoid in success. Disruption is always around the corner. 88. Your team's belief in your vision is your greatest asset. 89. Learn the art of storytelling. Ideas live longer when told well. 90. Celebrate small wins. They build momentum for big ones. 91. The best leaders create more leaders. 92. Keep a child's curiosity, but an adult's discipline. 93. Give before you take. The world remembers givers. 94. Never compromise on ethics shortcuts. Cut your destiny short. 95. Protect your health. It's the foundation of wealth. 96. Be remembered for kindness, not just brilliance. 97. Don't fear the future, design it. 98. Your biggest competitor is yesterday's version of you. 99. The real measure of success is freedom. Freedom to live, give, and impact. 100. Legacy is not about what you leave behind, but who you lift along the way.